Okay, super. So I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Tracy Reagan. I'm the CEO of what I like to call the little company that could, called Deploy Hub. We started thinking about what an evidence store looks like quite some time ago, starting with the concept of tracking deployments across many different tools and being able to see what an inventory looks like. And then we began to understand that we needed to add additional metadata about that inventory. And that's how we started building Ortelius and what I like to call our evidence store. I'm also on the board of the Open Source Security Foundation as a member rep. I'm also on the Technology Oversight Committee for the Continuous Delivery Foundation and have a very, very strong background in what we call it now DevOps. I'd like to call it lifecycle management. I'm not new to open source. I helped start the Eclipse Foundation way back when. I was one of the first 5 on that board. So I have done a lot of work with open source foundations, and I am the community manager for the Ortelius project. So open source is a love that I have, and I continue doing it. Steve, why don't you introduce yourself?
So Steve Taylor, I'm the CTO of Deploy Hub and one of the main contributors to the Ortelius project. I also work on another open source project called Persia, which is a build consensus network for handling some of the supply chain issues on the build side. So that is, and also I am kind of leading up our blockchain piece through the XRPL grant that we got from Ripple for the Ortelius project. So as part of we've started it, and kind of on the map to finish this year is our integration to provide an immutable ledger using blockchain technology. All right, Sasha, you're up.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name's Sasha. I'm based in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm a consultant for a German company called CubeVisor, where we specialize in migrating legacy applications to microservices. And I think I've been with Ortelius since it started. And that's my first and only open source project. I don't think I'll go anywhere else, as long as they'll have me.
Sergio, how about you up next?
Hey, I'm Sergio. Well, I work at RedHat Latin America. I've been like around 10 years as a consultant and now as an architect. Like 2 years ago, I think I received like I think it was like a tweet about Ortelius being joining the Lunatic Foundation, like an incubation project, and I said, hey, this looks fun. I just jump in, present myself. Since then, I'm being maybe not so active like a contributor, but sharing, practicing, helping to move out in the container space, doing mentoring, presentation. It's a really, I don't know, diverse community. I really enjoyed it. People all over the world, and I've been since then until today, and I try to stay involved, help when I can. Yeah, that's me. I work well in Latin America as an architect, application developer architect. So I try to share in both sides and help each other.
Sergio provides us a lot of feedback and input to the product, so he's been a prime contributor to this project. So, and humble.
Thank you, Tracy.
Anne Marie, want to jump in there?
Sure. So I was invited to run for position on the Ortelius governing board, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. So I'm a member of that governing board. My day job at Red Hat is I'm the integration architect for App Studio or Stone Soup or whatever we're calling it these days, which is a product around deployment automation as well as secure supply chain. So that's what my day job is at Red Hat.
How about Tony, Mr. Corrado?
Day job. I tend to avoid jobs as much as I possibly can. Long career as an architect. The last 20 years or so at IBM. These days, in addition to supporting the Tracy, Steve, and the Ortelius board, I'm on the board of a couple of small companies and active in open source standards, mostly around cybersecurity.
And just so you all know, before we kind of rounded our year up, Tony did provide us a list of additional, what you guys might consider attributes or metadata for what we call components. And we're looking at starting to build some of that into the product in 2023. I think it was timely that he presented that information because we had this meeting as a follow-up, and we'd love to get your feedback on that as well. Did I cover everybody from the Ortelius side? Did I miss somebody?
Nope, we're all good.
Well, then I'll turn it over to Jay to introduce your team.
Correct. We actually recently moved from North American public sales in Red Hat. We were an engineering team working out of sales, so that's kind of weird. But we've migrated to product security. So my skip boss is Vince Dannon, and I believe you guys know each other. What we do over here so far is kind of loosely defined. And we like to take advantage of not having things well defined like that so that we can create opportunities like this. So Alex, I believe, described this idea that he's had here for Emporous, used to be called UOR. I believe he called it a fever dream. He was working too much, I think. And then the rest of the team helped him make that a reality. And I've been running around internally in Red Hat, selling it to everybody I can in Red Hat to create a community and get somebody, some other team in product engineering to own this so that product security isn't writing tools for themselves. Stone Soup, for example, I've worked with the HackBS guys. That's the pipeline portion of Stone Soup, and they're in favor of using this. There's a bunch of other teams as well that are in favor of using this, but we could demo a minimum plausible product right now. So it's more like this is transitioning. I guess it's kind of like Pinocchio wanting to become a real boy, and we're on the cusp, I believe, of becoming a real boy. So, Alex, you want to go?
Sure. My name is Alex Flom. I've been with Red Hat for, I think, 2 years now. And worked with under Jay in North America public sector sales, where we were trying to streamline the administration or the administrative process of OpenShift in an air-gapped environment or air-gapped environments. So Kubernetes and an air-gapped containers, all those things. And that work directly fed into the work of on Emporous. And let's see, aside from that, yeah, I'll just leave it there. It's nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Jen, you want to go?
Yep. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Similar to Alex, new to the project team at Red Hat, I'm a senior product security engineer. I spent the last year and a half working on disconnected tooling for OpenShift. And I've been working in open source with open source software for about the last 3 years, particularly in the containers Kubernetes space. And yes, the disconnected work led me to be a contributor to the Emporous project.
Awesome.
Dan, you want to go?
Sure. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Hey, Sam Walker, Red Hat. I've been here for, I think it's coming up on 3 years. I started as a consultant here, so I wasn't always an engineer. Working with just general setups of OpenShift for customers. Moved over to engineering, helped with the OC Mirror project, which was the kind of disconnected tooling that was used a little bit, and as well as the new Emporous setup, which I'm mainly doing examples and demos for, and kind of contributing here and there as much as I can. So happy to be here, and happy to continue working with you all.
That leaves you, David.
Hey, I'm David. Do you guys hear me?
Yes.
I am yet another developer on Jay's team. Been supporting the same projects that my other teammates have mentioned, and I'm happy to learn about everything you guys have to talk about.
I think that does it for intros, right?
Yeah.
Super. Well, it's awesome to have so many people on this call. This is I think that we all have stumbled across an area that is underserved in terms of pulling all of this data together. It becomes even more and more critical, as you point out in your document, around being able to track CVEs. And what we like to say is answering the question, where is Log4j running? That's kind of one of our favorite questions to ask, right? Because we haven't figured out how to answer it. I'm going to share my screen just really quick here. And I'm going to just quickly introduce you to Ortelius. Let me see. We just did our kind of our end of the year holiday gathering. So Ortelius has been part of the Continuous Delivery Foundation since December of 2019. So technically we are 2 years old. We have 254 Google Group members. We're followed by 718 LinkedIn folks. We have 264 GitHub stars with 115 GitHub forks. Our Hacktoberfest, we did 24 pull requests, which we were proud of because that can be a heart. That's like herding cats. And overall in 2022, we had 203 total pull requests from our community. We do have a governing board. We have put these basic structures together in order to be ready to become an incubating project. A graduated project, which for us just means adoption. We have all the other pieces together to continue moving this product forward. Brian Dawson is also part of our governing board, as well as Utkar Sharma and Siddharth Parikh from NatWest Group, and they could not join today, but I know that they would have liked to be here. Ortelius, the name Ortelius comes from Abraham Ortelius. You have a boat as part of your image. Well, we saw that we saw this in terms of maps. Abraham Ortelius was the first person to consolidate maps of the world. And I believe it was 1570, he created the first world atlas. And when we started looking at this problem, we thought that was an appropriate kind of icon for us, Abraham Ortelius. We are in New Mexico, so we decided that the icon or the logo would be an alien. And so that's how our name and our logo came about. I'm also going to now bring up, I really would like us to go over your document. And I'm going to pass this over to Jay and Steve to really discuss, but I want to indicate that when we look at the goals here, being able to generate these reports. We see reports as being needed to be generated at what we call a component or a logical application level. CVE remediation, the ability to understand what your vulnerabilities are at any point in time, and support policy enforcement. We really are building a data lake so that something like you could start building out your own policies around how you want to see this information flow. So in terms of our goals, I feel like we're very, very strongly aligned. But there are some differences in how we're getting there. And I'm hoping that we can just talk through that so we understand where you're coming from and you can understand why we made the decisions that we made that may have taken a bit of a diversion from the direction that you're going. So in terms of your use cases, Steve, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to you. We had quite a discussion about this. So I'm going to hand this use case section off to you in terms of the questions we need to ask in terms of where your head is and where you're going.
Are you gonna bring up the document, or is Jay?
Oh, I thought I was.
No, we still see your PowerPoint.
Oh,
You're not
okay.
sharing your desktop, you're sharing.
Oh, okay, hang on then. Let me stop my share and then let me screen share again. How's that?
There we go.
Okay, thank you.
So as I was reading through your document, it kind of seems like you have a twofold type of solution that solution that you're trying to achieve. The first one being an OCI registry for everything. And the second one is as a result of having a registry for everything, that you're able to then gather metadata about what's in that registry. Is that the correct way of thinking about it?
Also the publishing side, but yes.
Okay.
Right. So it's, like a smart proxy or service layer in front of an OCI registry. And if we repurpose, that's the nice term, if we repurpose the constructs that they have in OCI right now, we can do most of this. If we're trying to figure out, can we do it better with extensions, or would we rather propose some additions to the OCI standard so that, like, for example, the searching and the being able to register these different documents, these different pieces of metadata which is the best approach. We've started some discussion with the OCI steering committee, but that's like at the very beginning stages there. So so there's the publishing, and then once you've got that there, then it's as creative as you want to be with what you want to do with it. So
right now, on the once something is published, are tools like Maven and pip going to consume what's in the registry on the, so you have the two sides, one's the publishing side, one's the consuming side. Are those tools going to be then able to look at the registry and consume what's in it?
So let's see, let's go advance some slides ahead to it may be like 10 slides. It's going to be a bunch of slides ahead. Yeah, keep going. Past it'll be the next section. So there's a section change. So yep. Keep going. And nope. It's quite a ways down. Maybe 6 more.
Under clients?
Yes, here we go. So to answer their question, it depends on the user's appetite for change. So in general, people don't like change. I've been a change agent most of my career. So some people will want to do this right away. All right, so there would be plugins that you could have for Maven, package managers, language specific package managers like pip or npm and so on. So if you have a plugin, we have a demo available for Python where we have a plugin for pip, and you would be able to make use of the metadata that's in an Emporous backed OCI registry you could ask, are there, I'll pick on Maven, because Maven generally doesn't use ranges for what dependencies they use. Those developers tend to specify exactly the version. So
Right.
you could ask what do you call them? CVEs are open against that project. So that you could also define in the plugin POM XML that you want to fail builds for open CVEs of severity greater than X. You could also, so that's the easy stuff, CVEs, but whatever metadata you have associated with those artifacts, you can also be creative in writing policies to enforce through the plugin. So it really comes down to, like, we want to publish, and then we want to be able to have policy enforcement engines in a variety of different places. So you can do that on the developer desktop. You can do that. You should be able to do that in the build pipeline. You should be able to do that publishing to whatever your output of, let's say it's a container, publishing to your container to a registry. There could be policies there, promoting it from one registry to another. There could be policies enforced there. Deploying it, there could be policies enforced there, and then monitoring afterwards, there can be policies enforced there.
And are you building the policy agent, or are you going to use something like OPA, provide the information for OPA?
I think it's good for Emporous to focus on publishing and making the data available and do that well, and then let creativity spread from there.
Okay, yeah, because that's the same view that we take from the Ortelius side, is we don't want to reinvent OPA just for, just get the data out there so people can consume it.
Well, I would say that is the kind of the direction in all of these pieces and parts. So we don't believe we want to try to be a replacement for Maven Central, for example. Adoption has always been, it's our biggest concern, and making sure that we are fitting into the tools that the pipelines are already consuming, because it's really hard to get people to change, as you just pointed out. Now, Red Hat has more influence, so you might be able to have a better ability to influence that change, but Ortelius, as an open source project, we knew it couldn't. So for the most part, what we are doing is we are referencing data and pulling those reference points into our central evidence store.
Yeah, so for example, and I don't know if it's been, if they've gotten this far, but let's say you do a build, and during that build, it's been signed with SigStore and published to, wherever it goes. For us, it's just from the Ortelius point of view, that is just data that we federate in, saying this is where that artifact lives and the associated metadata that's along with it. So the SigStore information, all those gory details is something that we would federate into a way to associate that to that version of that artifact. Now, one of the things that we have on, like I said, we're working on is backing these, we call them components, just as a generic term. So whatever the artifact is, whether it's Maven or Python, doesn't really matter. We call them components in our world, in versions of components. Those versions of the metadata information is in the process of being stored on a blockchain and IPFS. So we can then have an immutable view of that version and be able to search that information as well in the immutable ledger. So that's some of the stuff that we're looking at. But we, like Tracy said,
one of the reasons we went down that road, though, is because the amazing amount of data that there is in SBOMs, and for every single change you make, and we also have the concept of a logical application, and if we get time, we can show you what that is. But there's a lot of data that's being stored here, and that's why we decided to start looking at the blockchain technology and applied for the grant so that we could actually do some interesting research on it. We haven't committed to that, but we are definitely looking at using that as a way to manage a lot of data and track differences.
And one of the things that we've kind of recognized when we start federating all this data together, there's a huge amount of redundancy that you get. So if you just take a look at the Apache 2 license, there are so many projects out there that reference or use the Apache 2 license. And if you look at the SBOM data for a lot of the way that's stored in the SBOM, it's being redundant. So you end up wasting all this data storage just because you're referencing an Apache 2 license. So we've been doing a bunch of normalization on the data to help reduce the redundancy on the storage backend. We were talking to the folks at Armory last year, and they started doing SBOMs against the official Docker images. And they said within 2 weeks of just doing the SBOM on the 17,000 tags out there for the official Docker images, they had 3 gig worth of SBOM data in just 2 weeks. And nothing's really changing over that. You get parts of it changes, but not everything. Not every SBOM changes 100%. So that's one of the things that we've been looking at when we start federating the data together at that point.
So Stevia, Alex has a question. He has his hand raised.
Yeah. Well, so hearing some what the dialogue here is interesting. There's really so much overlap with what you're talking about with even how you're leveraging blockchain to record. We have something similar, but instead of blockchain, it's just the OCI's DAG that we're leveraging for in I think in a similar way that you described. Mm-hmm. And this idea of like logical applications, like's been mentioned. Jay at one point had mentioned container images, and it was an internal presentation that was the source of this presentation that we're looking at here. When we actually published the container image, and I'm air quoting container image here because what it actually was just the atomic components of what would be inside of the container image, and then we shoved those into a chroot and then ran those with container D and runc and all that. Mm-hmm. So, and that kind of like when you said when I heard logical application, that's kind of like where I went. It's all tied together with metadata at that point. It really changes the nature of what an application or a container image is.
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at when we talk about SBOMs, that there are many different levels of SBOMs. Like you said, if you're going to create a jar file using Maven, you're going to have a SBOM for that jar file, that jar and its dependent jar files that you're going to have. So you're going to have an SBOM at that level. And then like you said, when you get up to the container level, your container is going to have runtime SBOMs, so your RPMs and package dependencies at the OS level. And then you're going to have your jar file dependencies and so on. So you end up with these nested SBOMs And then when you go up to the next level of a microservice application that is dependent upon, 200 microservices that are running in containers, then you have another SBOM that is the logical application viewpoint for that version of the application running.
Yeah, which we can show you in just a minute if we have the time to do that. On this,
Tracy, can you go to slide 16 for me real quick?
yes, yes, I can.
So I don't know if this slide made sense to you guys, where the RPM is the index manifest here, but this is traditionally how a container would be built, right? So you've got your index manifest, and that's gonna be linked to other artifact manifests. And normally for how OCI storage and most other artifact storage repositories work is they're opaque. So the layers of a container are opaque, and we want to change that. So we want to store, this would be jar file. The artifact manifest would contain a jar file. If it was a fat jar file, it even gets exploded. So there's granular artifacts, and then you have many SBOMs attached to those. So you can, if we go down to a more complex example on slide 25, you can see how these things start to pull together. So we have both an RPM and an image on the left that share artifacts. So if you were trying to pull together an SBOM, you're not storing duplicative information between those shared artifacts. To build an SBOM for an image or the RPM, it's simply gather all the mini SBOMs, aggregate them together, and offer them to so even more complex examples. If you go to slide 27, I think, yeah. So you can, there's software inventories, and then one down, I think you get into logical groupings. Well, let's see, components from where components can be, like if an image is a component, then it breaks down into other artifacts. And then components can go up into products. Products could expand out into platforms, whatever type of organization you want. And that's just us thinking about how to do software. These types of how you organize things could also be used by, I'll give an example of like a hospital, to say, this is where we're keeping these, I can't remember the name of the thing. There you have an IV, IV pump. So an IV pump, where those machines are located at in the hospital. And so like which ones are being used, which ones aren't being used, which one could be updated remotely, which one, all sorts of the inventory of how it's being used becomes important. And they can store that information in here as well to be able to help manage that. So it's not just how we could use these things, it's how a customer could define arbitrary aggregations to help them manage their environments.
Yeah, and this is exactly how the Ortelius side thinks of it. Except that instead of product, we use application or logical application. We've had this debate over the years of changing it from application over to product. It's just one of those debates that we never could get consensus on. But
and we have other things to worry about.
But like you said, a component can be anything, whether it's going to be, we could have test case components, we could have database components, you could have artifact components of like a jar or a Python module, or containers as container images as a component.
So let's go back to this, what he was talking about, because I think there's a difference here in their strategy. We are not digging into a container and then exploding it out basically and looking for the artifacts inside the container.
No, we do at the SBOM level.
At the SBOM level, we do.
Yeah.
But in terms of what we manage is we're storing a container. And so we have three types of components: a file, a container, and a database. So we are not storing the artifacts themselves. We just know that that is being consumed by that particular container.
And where to go get it. So one of the views that we took in the Ortelius world was we're not going to be a new registry. We're going to point to the existing registries that are out there, whether it's going to be Maven or JFrog or Sonatype as a registry for the Java artifacts, or if it's going to come from somebody's desktop. It doesn't really matter to us, but we're going to track those.
Yep. Slide 15 will show the same thing. So we want to be able to meet people where they're at right now. So see in the top right hand corner, there's a watch and it says now.
Yep.
So if it says now, this is where we think people would be willing to adopt this much today. And then the ones that have a different watch pointing to the future it's too much change for today, but people could go there over time. So using a PURL, they could point, as in the example here, point at a jar file over in Maven Central, or point at a Python library over in PyPy, or list goes on. So we want to be able to do both.
So this is where we are at right now. So I think, unless there's other questions about Steve that you might have about this, I think this would be a good juncture to go ahead and we have 20 minutes left, give a 10-minute tour of what we've already done.
Yep.
Can I just interject before you do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not really conveyed in this brief here, but if you look at the larger body of work that I think we've done around Emporous, there's this idea where you have Emporous can consume any schema. So you have a schema with Ortelius. You've defined references all these concepts. And I thought maybe it would be helpful as you're going over the Ortelius approach. One of the interesting things I think that could be kept in mind here is this idea that the Ortelius schema, or what was the guacs, is it OSV, or any schema could be registered with Emporous and then easily managed after it's registered. So as you're kind of going through this next 10 minutes of the Ortelius approach, I think there is this accompanying idea that that schema, or any schema, could be also expressed with Emporous in the same way, in using the native OCI components.
We studied your guys' schemas, and we that's one of the things that we don't want to reinvent. So
right, and
lifting,
and a lot of our schemas that we have are mainly dependency relationships. So when you normalize the data and you start breaking apart, you have this specific jar file. For example, this jar file has this metadata attached to it. This metadata is actually broken up into smaller pieces that is referenced elsewhere, such as the licenses, the location, CVE data is actually pointed to in real time, the type of thing, because you don't want to lock in your CVE data, because it could change. Somebody could find a new CVE for that particular jar file today or tomorrow, and you don't want to have that static CVE data in there. Let me share my screen, and I will keep that in mind as I walk through this and kind of show. I get zoom out of the way here.
It says deploy hub up here. That is our most stable. This is basically Ortelius with a deploy hub logo on it, because we do host it. It's not being hosted at the Linux Foundation right now. Ortelius is not. We would like that to happen. We're hoping that they will. We can get some funds from the CD Foundation to host it. But we were hosting it, and it started to get a little bit more expensive than we wanted. So right now, Ortelius is pretty much kind of an on-prem install. So we're only showing you what Ortelius does. We're not going to show you what Deploy Hub does.
So like we were talking about the components, we view everything as a component. These happen to be Docker images. And one of the things that we do is in your pipeline, anytime you build something, a new version of an image, we want to capture that information about that image that was produced by the build pipeline, even if it doesn't go to production. We want to make sure that everything is available if somebody needs it at some point. So some of the information that we capture is like, who is the owner of the container? Is there a Slack channel out there that the SREs or the release team can manage? They want to reach out to the developers. What's the PagerDuty information for the call downs sheet? Other things, where was it built? This one happened to be built on a Circle CI. There's the digest and stuff like that. Is there a Helm chart that's being used to deploy it? Those type of things. The Git repo, the SHAs, which branch it came from, those type of things. And then also on the other side, what type is it? Is it a container? Is it a jar file? We can, and people can create their own types to categorize the information. Other things that we pick up out of that that we persist on our side is the README, the Swagger information, because this could change over time. And one of the things that as developers may change, one of the endpoints, they may go ahead and change, the URL here. So they may break backward compatibility or may add new functionality. And because we're versioning all this information, we can actually diff and show how API endpoints are changing over time. And then we get into the fun stuff. Because this is a Docker image, we pulled the SBOM. So these are the packages that are actually installed. This is a Python based microservice. So you can see Flask is here, the database connection. And then we also found, because we had this list of the packages that this version of the container is dependent upon, we go out to OSV dev and check to see what the CVEs are at runtime. So when I pull this up and view this is where we go pull the package information. I mean, the CVE information. And then we get into more fun details. Who's consuming this, the list of applications that are actually consuming this version, and we can see that in a graphical view as well. So we actually have two different application versions consuming this particular microservice. On the deploy hub side, we can bring in change requests or issues or tickets, wherever you want to call them. Ortelius doesn't do that, but that's one of the upsells on the deploy upside. So if we take a look at from the other point of view, if we go up to an application, and like this is like we were talking about a product, we call them applications on our side. So we're going to look at a version of the application and see how that application is pulling in all of its logical dependencies. So at this level, this application has, because it's a microservice-based application, has about 15, 20 services that it's bringing in. So this is where we start doing the aggregation level. And we're going out and getting the CVEs now to find out what, across all the different components that we have, which ones are giving us the highest level of vulnerability. So we can actually see that we have a Node.js dependency that has a high vulnerability that we need to take a look at. So it doesn't matter the type, like you were talking about, Alex. The type is kind of irrelevant. We just need to know that we have a dependency, and that dependency has a CVE on it. And then here we can see that it's the total aggregation of all the different SBOMs are rolled up to the high level at that point. And then this is the graphical representation of it. So if I actually zoom in a little bit, we can actually see all the dependencies that this main application that's in the middle, all the dependencies that it has, and versions. One of the things that's important to the Ortelius side is versions of this data. You want to be able to see which version of a particular artifact that you're consuming, because today this version of the artifact, we have these CVEs. Now, if I look at the next version, the developers may have already fixed it. So we want to version everything. Every single change gets versioned, and that's where the blockchain ledger comes into play at that level as well. Other things, let me go back up to the high level. Like Tracy said, we all want to know about Log4j. So because we have all the dependencies and the relationships stored, we can just say, give me all the dependencies, and I can get a list of all which packages which components are consuming which version of a particular library at that point. So this is, we can see that there's Log4j is being consumed in multiple applications across multiple components at that level. So answering that question is very easy for us to look at. So I'm just going to stop there, since we have about 10 minutes left, and we can dive into the gory details whenever you want.
Sure. When I think it was it was just before Thanksgiving. I gave our proposal to Vince, and Vince asked me, how is this different from, well, he asked me ahead of time to be prepared to answer, how is this different than Ortelius? So a week before that meeting with him, the team here, we went through what Ortelius is and the documentation and reading the code. And I believe if you guys wanted to use Emporous, it would simply replace your Postgres database, is what it would do. So you wouldn't have to manage a Postgres database. You would at a customer site, they would have some type of OCI registry already. So that's where you would end up storing things. So why do I think that's helpful, because then it's one less thing that has to be managed by somebody, but also you get a little closer to things being stored together in one repo. And why is that important? Because right now you have to go to a bunch of different places. You have to go out to SigStore to do this. You have to go all sorts of different places to gather this information. And then if we get the community being comfortable with this type of thing. So my ambition is to have this type of thing replace Maven Central and replace PyPy and those types of things, because they don't have great answers right now for how there's going to be a bunch of language specific solutions, it seems right now, is the track the community's on for how they're each going to solve how we address the same problem. And we could offer instead a unified way that solves it for all languages. And at that point, when you have your SBOM information and the artifact, when they're stored together, the whole thing gets signed. So it's not, I have my artifact and I have my trusty information about that artifact stored separately, and I have to do some verification as a client to validate that this trustee information and that artifact go together, it's actually turned around and put on the publisher to publish those things together so that trust becomes implicit at that point. So
yeah, definitely. And I could definitely see how we can utilize, like you said, replace our Postgres database with Emporous to pull from that type of information and aggregate it together. One of the things that we are looking at as part of our blockchain implementation is actually implementing a graph database to help with the dependency management, just to be able to traverse the millions of relationships, if you look at the open source world, that need to be managed at that level. Also, on that note, we are also taking a view that there will be like you said, a kind of a public registry that's out there, and then also your private one that needs to be federated together. So as an open source, if I'm the developer of Log4j, I can't necessarily see who's consuming me in a private, company doesn't want to show that they're exposing that these are my list of points that you can attack me at. But vice versa, when I'm inside of a corporation, I can look out and see and consume all that information to aggregate it together from that viewpoint, to see where my exposures lie at that level. So that's one of the things that we're working on at the is federating from two different viewpoints.
We're
Jay.
Yep.
I just wanted to very quickly. One of the things that we put quite a bit of work into with Emporous early on, well, recently before the holiday break, actually, was this idea of a decentralized service. So you could query, for example, like Quay.io or something, or you could even query your internal registry, and then you would also be discovering content in, I'm just using this as an example, but like Docker Hub. So when you query Quay, you're also discovering if there's pointers to other content across the registry. So that was a big focus was the decentralization aspect. And I just wanted to say, just very quickly, and this is outside the context of, I think, what the Red Hat's primary right now is what we've been talking about. But this idea of schema registration, extensibility, also applies to a website. Could also be an idea of like a package, another type of package. So like you could have all of the web elements in the website signed. So not only is your TLS session encrypted, but also you have all of your web elements that are being rendered or signed. And then also this applies to AI models as well. And I think that the AI ML ops is an emerging security consideration that's a hot issue. So I just wanted to get that out before the end of the meeting.
Yeah, and those, like I said, are just more components to us, like in your world.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jay.
No, no
right.
worries.
I think we're I'll save mine for next time.
All right.
And I definitely think I would love to see what you guys have, where you are at in your process, and really have maybe a little deeper discussion once we've gone back to our camps and thought about what we've learned today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
That'd be
definitely
great.
like to see how where you're at, and more about the schema that you're talking about, Alex, and how that could come into play.
Yeah, definitely. Because when you talk about blockchain, and I'm thinking to myself, well, with this Emporous API, we could render like a recore service too behind, because this API, if you have whatever schema you're feeding into it, it can just render the contents of whatever the schema is. So if it was recore or some blockchain or whatever it is, I think there's a a potential there.
Yeah. So right now our implementation is to utilize the IPFS because that gives us an immutable place to kind of shove our JSON, with the dependencies in it and stuff like that. And the blockchain just records that this is where you go find this data in the IPFS world. Now, the blockchain could point over to Emporous to gather that immutable data over there. So for us, it doesn't really matter. It's here, there, nor there where it's stored. It's just, how do you get to it? And on your side, you're doing an immutable versioning of this data. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all content. We have this idea. You have location addressing, and then IPFS loves content addressing. And then we have this middle of the road we refer to as attribute addressing, where you kind of get the best of both worlds there.
Okay, cool.
You guys should take a look at, you guys check me, I've got dyslexia. Is it Taz or Zat that they want to look at?
Zot.
Oh, Zot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You guys should look at Zot.
ZOT or ZAT?
ZOT.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. We'll take a look at that.
Yeah, it's a Cisco registry. They just put in a search extension, which is similar to what we wanted to do, but it doesn't have all the additional metadata. It just searches like what layers are on this manifest, or how big is this manifest, and all that good stuff that's already inside the OCI manifests.
Okay, nice.
Well, thank you all for jumping in on this first full day of work for 2023. And when would be a good time to follow up?
Because we definitely like to have a look at your side.
Next week.
Next week works. You pick the time. I'll make sure it works for my side.
We can do the same time if you want.
Same time, Tuesday the 10th then?
Mm-hmm.
And we've met at 10 o'clock. We have a general community meeting at that time, but we could do 10:30. We have actually, no, I'm not, I'm making a mistake. It's 9:30. Yeah, 10 o'clock Tuesday the 10th will work.
Okay. Cool.
I will send out an invite to everybody who is on this thread.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you next week.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.